Hello and welcome to a new video. If you're new here, my name is Tasmin, I'm an author, I'm a freelance creative, and I make videos on this channel about my life on the Azores archipelago, sustainability, and books. And today I have my Nonfiction November wrap-up for you, and I also want to briefly talk about NaNoWriMo, which was also in November. Before I dive into the books that I read for Nonfiction November, I wanted to briefly talk about NaNoWriMo because it was a big part of my month. As you know, I'm an author, and so far I've published these two books, The Anatomy of Waves, which is a poetry collection, and Welcome Home, Dear Soul, which is a poetic encounter with death. And these two books are very much in the veins of poetry. This is not really like poems, but it is definitely poetic. So both of these books are very much in the genre of poetry, but I also write novels. Actually, I've been writing novels for a very long time, and I always wanted to be published, and I still really want to be published, traditionally published, as a novel writer as well. And I tried for a very long time, and I only got rejected. And I stressed myself so much that I stopped writing completely for many years. The only thing that I could write was poetry. And I, this year, found my way back to novel writing, which makes me so happy. I'm like so joyful and excited within me that I'm back to writing fiction books, and that makes me so happy. And so I was like, okay, let's do this. I want to participate in NaNoWriMo and see if I can push myself to finish the draft that I'm currently working on. And the first week, the first 10 days maybe, went really well. Like, I may not have always hit the target that you need for each day, but I was writing every single day. And then around the middle of the month, I just stopped writing completely. So I failed in NaNoWriMo, even though I feel like it was successful because I pushed myself, but at the same time, I know exactly why I stopped. The thing is, if you're looking for writing advice, the biggest writing advice that you see almost everyone give is write every day. Even if it's just a sentence, even if it's something that you don't like, you can always delete it later. Even if you don't feel like it at all, push yourself, sit your butt down and write at least a little bit. And while that is great advice and maybe working for a lot of people, I personally have never agreed with it at all because I'm just not that type of writer. I need to have the feeling of joy to write. Maybe because I've already burnt myself out before I ever got published, I don't know. But I don't know, I can't deal with this writing advice. This is not working for me. And so, of course, NaNoWriMo is exactly that. No matter if you feel it, no matter if you only have 5 minutes of time, you should push yourself and you should write every single day. And I just lost the joy of my manuscript within like the middle of the month. And I didn't feel like picking it up again. And I got so sad about it because I had stopped writing for years, and it took me so much to come back to this joy and excitement and this like longing to write and like this excitement for a story, that I was like, no, I'm not going to push myself with NaNoWriMo and lose the love that I have for this manuscript and the story that I want to tell. And I took a step back and I focused on all the other things that I had to do this month because it was a very busy month in my freelance stuff and with Nonfiction November, and privately it was just a lot of stuff going on. I had a lot of things on my plate, and NaNoWriMo was just a bit too much, and it was like really taking my joy away from writing. Besides the fact that as a freelance writer and translator, I write every day. I just don't write on my manuscript every day. So I don't think that is like helping necessarily, because sometimes I write for my freelance stuff and then I have like zero creativity left for my novel writing, which is something I try to change. I would like to change my freelance life a little bit so I have more creativity and more energy for the things that I actually love doing and that I actually want to do going forward into the future. Now let's talk about Nonfiction November, the readathon where you try to read as much nonfiction as you can, or more nonfiction that you usually read. And this year I've been reading a lot of nonfiction, so I knew I had to at least read like 1, 2, maybe 3 books. And I didn't feel like I was very successful. I thought I was not doing very well. And then I looked at my statistics now for this video and I'm like, wait a minute, I finished 8 books. This is like the most I read in a single month all year. Okay, I guess I did very well. The first of the 8 books was not a nonfiction book. I will talk about that one in an upcoming Growing Roots episode. But the first nonfiction book that I read was Light the Dark. So this was the first time that I read a book that is like written for authors and writers. I know there are quite a few of them out there, but I never felt a pull towards them, and the few that I have tried to pick up, I always DNF'd or put down or just forgot about them. I don't know, I never got like a good one. If you have recommendations, please leave them linked down below. But this book here was actually really lovely. It is based on the concept that writers and authors take a quote from a song, from a book, from a story, from a poem, whatever they want, and tell the story why this quote is so important for them and how that quote or that story where it's from or that poem where it's from has changed them, like either personally or their writing life or whatever. And it comes with a lot of like genuine writing advice, but it's not like, okay, do this, do this, do this. It just tells the personal stories of all these different kind of writers. And so therefore you will find some things helpful and some things you're like, okay, yeah, that's not my cup of tea. But it's actually really lovely to get like to know a little bit more of the diversity of writers and how different people approach writing and what touches them. So I thought that was very interesting. I thought that was really lovely. It was by no means a book that like completely blew my mind and that I think about every day. Absolutely no, but it was really lovely, especially in combination with NaNoWriMo. The next book is The Future We Choose. And I actually forgot to talk about this book in my TBR video, I think. Because this is a book that I actually started quite a while ago and then I put it down because, I don't know, the middle was not that exciting and I didn't really feel it. So, and I got like distracted by other things and other books. So I just like put it on my little pile of shame, which is very small at the moment, which makes me very happy. And I just never picked it up again. And I thought, okay, perfect, Nonfiction November, this is the perfect time to finish up this book. And so I did. And I have to say, the beginning of the book I loved. I loved the very beginning of the book. I couldn't agree more. I posted like screenshots of the first pages on my Instagram story because I was like, yes, 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 to every line. And then as the book progressed, I just wasn't a huge fan. Because it's very much focused on like the agreements, the climate agreements, which is interesting, don't get me wrong, also because the authors have like organized all of this and like had a big part in this, so it's not like they observed from the outside, no, they were a part of this. And especially with COP going on, it was interesting to read this account, but for me personally, it just didn't have like that power that it could have had. It was not harsh enough. It was not really waking people up as much, I think, as it could have. And it was not really going beyond the thing of, okay, politics coming together and like people making some better choices. I think it could have gone further, if that makes sense. Overall, I still recommend it. It was just, in comparison to all the climate books that I've read so far, it was one of my least favorites. The next book that I read was Reason for Hope by Jane Goodall. Not to be confused with her newest release, The Book of Hope. That is from this year. This book that I read was first published in 1997. Sorry, completely got it wrong. 1997. And it feels like an account from yesterday. It's incredible. Like what she describes how nature got destroyed in like the, I don't know, 20, 30 years of her field work, like how much nature got destroyed, how dangerous it is, how many like animals died out and how pollution got riskier and riskier and how politics were crazy and globalization was happening, and like you're just so overwhelmed from the news and everything all the time. It literally feels like it's from yesterday. Like if she wouldn't like mention the specific things that happened at the time, which you know is a long time ago, I would think this has happened like in the last decade. What she wrote, it was so accurate, and that makes me so sad because this book is from 1993 and was the edition that I read was republished in 2000, but still that's 21 years ago, almost 22 years ago. And still the warnings that she says and the pleas that she sends out into the world of us needing to rescue the planet and saving nature are still so accurate, so accurate, because not a lot has changed. Like, yes, nowadays you have hope, definitely, because you have movement and you have young people who are very invested in the topic and things are happening, and that's great. But I feel like a lot of the problems, also like the mental overwhelm of globalization, has just gotten worse with the internet, because like she didn't have internet back then, okay? This is like pre-internet, this book. So it's crazy to me how a book from that time is still so timely today. It also talks a lot about her personal journey with faith and religion and spirituality and nature, and that was very interesting. I felt like I really got to know her on a personal and on a professional level as well. It was very, very interesting, and it was a very lovely read. She writes really well. Again, by no means a top favorite book of my life, but definitely a wonderful one. The next book that I read was an audiobook that was actually on my TBR, and that was Wir können mehr sein. This is a German book by a German young politician of the Green Party. We have a political party that is very much focused on nature and sustainability, and yeah, she's one of the newest politicians of this party, and she's so far pretty successful. And of course, she is a person of color, which in Germany, especially given our history of the last century and things like that, is something very special and something very cool. And it was so interesting to read her accounts, like from so many perspectives, not only her perspective as just a normal citizen in Germany, as like a private person, and her experiences with racism and how life can be hard if you're not like someone that looks like the norm, and also her way into politics, why she went into politics and how she ended up with the party that she chose in the end, her insight of that party, her insights into politics, and what she envisions for the future. I have to be super honest, I never heard about her before reading this book. But I also have to say that I have strove away from reading the German news a lot in the last few years, so I might have just missed out on her because of that, because she's amazing. She is incredible, and I really am happy that I read this book. But again, I think that's like the topic with most of the books that I read this month. It was a very good book, but by no means like a favorite book that I will forever and ever remember and think about every day. But it was definitely a very educational read. It was very insightful, and I highly, highly recommend it for everyone living in Germany, no matter if you support the Green Party or not. The next book that I read was again an audiobook, and it was also in German, and that book is called Body Politics. And this is written from a woman who used to work like in the magazine fashion industry, and again was very insightful, and it talks a lot about like beauty standards, eating disorders, and how the current beauty standards is like oppressing women without us even knowing it, and we are upholding this oppression of ourselves, and how crazy that is, and like her personal fight through all of this, and her way of starting to love herself as someone who's not size 0 and stuff like that. I really enjoyed the book, but it is definitely not a happy book. It dives deep into really the harsh reality and the harsh truths of this industry and what this industry and this beauty standards and things like that can do to you. I really enjoyed the book. I also love that she gave credit to other people, that she was writing very inclusively, because that is often the case when you read a book by like a white feminist, that it's often not as inclusive as it should be, and that they often don't really recognize their own privilege as much. But she did, I think. Maybe I cannot judge it because I'm white myself, but from me, I personally thought she did it very well. She gave credit to a lot of other people. She was writing very inclusively. And yeah, of course, this is a very Western-centric book. Obviously, it's set in Germany. It talks a lot about the German experience and like the Western experience, like Central Europe and America and Canada. So like, if you're like in that realm, this book might be interesting for you. Of course, at the moment, it's only available in German, so yeah, but it was a very interesting book. And then I read, or I finished, or I DNF'd, let's say it like this book. Oh my God. This was my main focus of the month. I talked about this in my TBR video. I was so excited to read this book because the cover is so beautiful and it's about the science of touch, which I found so interesting. But this book is trash, and I'm gonna throw it out of my shelf in the second that I stop filming this video. When I'm done with this video, this thing is moving out of my life. Why, you may ask? Well, let me fill you in. First of all, the description of the book that is on the back sounds very much like this is going to be like one of those popular science books that are very approachable, work a lot with storytelling, and are just like very well written. And like, even if you have never dabbled into like the science itself, in this case it's I think biology and neuroscience, I guess, that you still understand everything, and like that you like go deeper and deeper into the topic the further you get into the book, and you can like take the knowledge and apply it to your own life. And this is how it sounds like. It's not at all like this. This is so science heavy. But this is not the reason why I DNF'd this, because while I had problems with it being so science heavy, I really like biology. And I was in the beginning, for the first, I think 2 chapters, I was thinking, okay, like this is definitely a book that I will pick up again at some point when I'm again deeper into biology. I used to be a super biology nerd, and then I just got out of it, and currently I'm like hyper focusing on sustainability. So one day I might go back into biology again a little bit more, and then I would go back to this. But then came chapter 3. And this author, who is a man, obviously, chose an actual rape case to explain how hand jobs work on like a biological neuroscience level. What the actual hell? So this is a tiny trigger warning. I'm not gonna go much into detail, but I'm gonna briefly talk about the whole topic. So if you have problems with that, I put like a timestamp here when you can come back. But yeah, let's just say there was also no trigger warning in this book. So yeah, this author took the liberty of taking a case of 2 young cis hetero people, or I don't know if they're hetero, but they were in a heterosexual relationship. And the man, or the boy, I don't know, the teenage guy, he violated and traumatized his back then girlfriend in a way that is almost unspeakable. It's incredible. Our author here got the story from the courtroom because the girl sued the guy, good for her, and he was found guilty. And the author was in the courtroom because he was one of those people who are getting called to court to judge. Like, he's not a lawyer or anything, he's like a normal person. I don't really know how that's called. But yeah, he was there. And some part of the author's brain went like, oh wow, this story of this girl who got traumatized for the rest of her life, wow, that sounds like a great opening story for my book. And like, what the heck?
What the actual heck? You could have made up any kind of fictional scenario where you like talk about consensual things, because he goes on to explain how a handjob works, which already is kind of like a weird example to give in a book that is not very long. It's just 200 pages and he goes on for like 20 pages or something about that topic. So it's like, okay, that's already very uncomfortable. And the thing is, in that case, the guy defended himself of doing all these crimes and doing all this violence against this young 16-year-old girl because the handjob she gave him was not satisfying. And the author went on to explain why the guy didn't find it satisfying. Excuse me, what the actual hell is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? And then the next chapter is a chapter about sexual touch. I read a few pages and I DNF'd the book because he goes on to describe in miraculous detail his own personal sex life and like how it felt like sleeping with the women that he did, and ew, what the fuck? What the... Moving on, I only had one more book that I read this month, and it's called It's Not Your Money. And I got this as a recommendation from Farah the Frequency. I talked about her in a Growing Roots episode before. And it's a spiritual book all about money. And this is something that has a very specific audience. And I'm not completely certain if I am the target audience of this book, because while I am spiritual, it's not like the biggest thing of my life. It's not like my identity, and it's not something that I like have in my mind 24/7. So it was very interesting. It was a refreshing take on money, and I think it gave me a lot, but at the same time I don't feel like this book was written for me, if that makes any sense at all. So yeah, those were the books that I read. Overall very meh, and one really as a reading experience, but I actually completed the 4 prompts that were not necessary at all. It was just like a fun thing, but we had 4 words and to choose books that fit them. For collection, I have Light in the Dark, because it's a collection from stories and essays from different writers. For treatment, The Future We Choose would count really well, because it talks a lot about how we treat the planet. Wir können mehr sein fits very well into the industry category, even though body politics would also count for that. But body politics I see a lot in style, because she talks a lot about fashion, style, you know. And yeah, I completed and succeeded at Nonfiction November, and I'm really happy, and I'm gonna throw this book away now. Goodbye! Obviously, I'm not gonna actually throw it away. I cannot throw books away, but I'm gonna kick it out of my life. I hope you all have a fantastic day. See you next week. Bye!